What happens when one of the biggest teams in history discovers that his car is broken from within? And the only one who saw him coming was the new star signing? This is the story of how Lewis Hamilton went from being the pilot criticized to be absolutely right, and the finding that left Ferrari in a state of emergency. Statements. Frustration. The car is unmanageable, he said. I can't trust him in fast curves. And as has happened so many times in this category, the immediate response of Paddock was to minimize it. For many, he was nothing more than an aged champion, unable to adapt to his new machine. There was talk of a man surpassed by the times, caught in a team that still lives from past glories. But what was happening was much deeper. Hamilton was not complaining about ego. He was launching a technical, acute warning that only someone with his level of sensitivity and experience could detect. And that's where Fred Vasseur enters. Unlike other directors who have occupied their place, Vasseur did not close their ears. He did not dismiss Hamilton's words like tantrums of a frustrated star. He did something radical, investigated, and launched an internal audit that few within Ferrari expected. Because in Maranello, historically, decisions were not made by pilot sensations. They were taken by politics, by hierarchy, by tradition. But this time, Vasseur broke with all that. The result was a shock. Ferrari SF25 did not have a setup failure. I had a design failure. One that compromised the base of the car and that, if not corrected, would drag the team to a lost season. For Hamilton, that revelation was a mixture of bitter satisfaction and hopelessness. Yes, his words had been validated. Yes, now everyone listened to it. But the price of that truth was high. Because while other pilots accumulated podiums and points, he fought against a car that did not respond. And the most dramatic thing is that he saw him come from day one. Once Ferrari decided to look at the truth, one of the most delicate technical investigations that the team has made in recent years began. It was not an isolated failure. What they found was a network of systemic errors that explained, with painful clarity, why Lewis Hamilton felt that he was driving a broken car. It all started with telemetry. The data does not lie. And in the case of SF25, what they showed was a progressive and constant loss of aerodynamic load in high-speed sectors. What does this mean in practice? That the car, upon reaching a fast curve, could not generate sufficient descending force to stay stuck to the ground. And when that happens in Formula One, the result is a single-seater which slides that threatens to escape in each curve. This is especially critical in circuits such as Barcelona, where the combination of long and fast curves requires absolute stability. But in SF25, that stability simply did not exist. And the most disturbing thing is that the degradation of that aerodynamic load was not linear. It was presented intermittently, which generated microfalls difficult to diagnose in real time. Small flickers in stability that no engineer could see from the screen, but that a pilot like Hamilton felt immediately. The problem, however, went far beyond aerodynamics. Because what really condemned SF25 was its mechanical architecture, specifically the rear suspension. Designed under a pull rod scheme, this system should allow the car to maintain an optimal body height and a balanced weight distribution, even under extreme G-forces. But on the track, none of that worked as in the simulator. The rigidity of the flat background and the suspension was insufficient. Literally, the car collapsed on itself in certain points of the layout. Every time he passed through a high-load curve, the background touched the asphalt. And we don't talk about occasional contact. It was a constant abrasion that missed the return car after return. This forced Ferrari to make a decision that, in practice, is a defeat confession, to raise the height of the car above the competitive standard. And what is the price of that? A dramatic loss of aerodynamic efficiency. Because by increasing height, airflow under the car loses pressure, and therefore the soil effect is reduced. The car is slower. It is less stable. And the worst, he cannot compete with teams such as McLaren or Red Bull, who have managed to maintain low heights with well-calibrated suspensions. But there does not end the problem. Ferrari also discovered that the front wing of the SF25 had an inconsistent response to abrupt direction. That is, when the pilot tried to make a correction or a rapid change of experience, the front train took some fractions of a second more to respond. In Formula One, a second fraction may be the difference between keeping the car on the track or getting out. And as if all this was not enough, there is one more element that sounds all alarms: thermal problems. Despite having introduced a new soil in the Austria Grand Prix, Ferrari was forced to apply extreme management techniques such as the lift and coast. This maneuver, which consists of releasing the accelerator before usual and letting the car roll by inertia, is an emergency strategy to control temperatures. In other words, Ferrari was turning off fires. Literally. Because the SF25 was overheating both in internal components and in the ERS battery. And that, in full career, compromises both performance and reliability. The conclusion was clear. The car was not the problem of a weekend. It was a root problem. Design. A conceptual failure that is not fixed with minor adjustments, but requires a structural redesign in full season. Something extremely expensive, risky, and that could leave the team out of the fight for the championship even before the summer stop. And perhaps the most dramatic is this: all of the above was warned by a single man, before any sensor, before any simulator. Lewis Hamilton. For Lewis Hamilton, Vasseur's revelation was not simply a technical correction. It was a personal earthquake. For weeks, his voice was ignored or minimized by the environment. He was pointed out as the typical veteran pilot, unable to adapt, clinging to his past glories. Many questioned if the 7-time world champion still had something to contribute. He was accused of looking for excuses, of not being ready for Ferrari's challenge. But then the truth came. The validation was total. Every word he had said since his first race with the SF25 was confirmed in the engineering room. Each sensation, each frustrated phrase transmitted by radio, every time he said, "The car does not respond," or "I have no grip in fast curves," they were no longer regrets of an uncomfortable pilot. They were diagnoses, pure precision. Lewis wasn't crying. I was warning. And now everyone knows. But this claim did not come without emotional cost. Because while the team analyzed data and simulations, Hamilton lived in their own flesh the price of that defect. Race after race, he went on track knowing that he had a limited car that could not fight on equal terms. And the hardest thing was to have to hide. Because in Ferrari, where expectations are as high as the weight of the chest shield, admit that the car is a disaster is perceived as weakness. And yet he did. With dignity. With honesty. With that mixture of professionalism and rebellion that has defined him throughout his career. Hamilton knew he was saying things that would not fall well in Maranello, but chose not to shut up. And now it is the team who has had to adapt to him and not vice versa. This turn also changes internal dynamics in Ferrari. Because it's not just about having Hamilton as a pilot. It is about giving him power, voice, real influence on technical decisions. And that, in a structure as hierarchical as that of Ferrari, is a seismic movement. For the first time in a long time, the team is willing to build around its pilot. To listen. To redirect its technical development based on what Lewis needs. Validation is also double, because it arrives in a context where Hamilton has shown that it still has speed, that his talent has not disappeared, which can be faster than Leclerc in classification, which can adapt to a completely new driving style, that can be reinvented at 40 as he did once in Mercedes, and now he is doing it again in the most complicated team of all. And this resonates beyond paddock, because what is at stake here is not just a season, it is a legacy. Hamilton did not come to Ferrari to charge a last big check. He came to close his career with a masterpiece, to show that it can return the Scuderia to the top with the same hands that brought Mercedes to the absolute domain. And that narrative, which seemed romantic but naive at the beginning of the season, now begins to seem possible. What happened with Vasseur's discovery has also changed external perception. The press, which previously attacked mercilessly, now clarifies. The analysts who ended it now wonder if we are seeing the beginning of a historical comeback. Fans, even those who criticized him, have begun to understand that Hamilton is not just a fast pilot. He is an architect, a builder, someone capable of detecting failures before anyone else and push a whole team to correct the course. And that is where the true power of this impact lies. Not at the points that you can add in the short term, but in the transformation that has already begun within Ferrari. Because now that the team has seen with its own eyes that Hamilton was right, there is no turning back. He will be heard. He will have influence. He will finally be the technical and emotional leader of a team that for decades has sought, without success, such a figure. The question that is floating is, do they arrive on time? Can Ferrari correct enough this season to allow Hamilton to fight for something big? We don't know. But one thing is clear, if they succeed, it will be for him. Because it was his shout that woke up the sleeping giant. Because it was his instinct who opened the eyes of the team. And because it was his persistence that made, finally, Ferrari looked in the mirror and decided to change. Now that you know everything behind the SF25, everything that Vasseur found and what it meant for Lewis Hamilton, tell me, what would you do if you were in place? Would you fight a defective car while the world criticizes you? Or would you give up and accept that a culture like Ferrari cannot be changed in just a few months? Do you think Vasseur will make the right decisions on time to give Hamilton the car you need? Or is it too late to rescue this season? And more importantly, will this be the story of an epic redemption, or the final chapter of a motorcycle legend trapped in a machinery that was not up to it? I want to know your opinion. Do not leave your point of view in the comments. Are you on the side of Hamilton from Leclerc, or do you think the problem is even deeper within Ferrari?